Hello folks, this is Norm the teacher again. Got that urge to teach you something else, so I'm going to do it. Today's video is about the 1991 Mazda 626 2.2 liter engine. And today I want to show you some detail about a ball joint and what a ball joint is. You know, a lot of these videos on YouTube, they're great videos. They'll quickly show you what a ball joint is, and they'll quickly show you this step and that step on removing things. But I like to go into detail so that you can learn in a little more detail. Those other videos are great. They have their contribution, and a detailed video will have its contribution. So here's the ball joint on a 1991 Mazda 626 2.2 liter engine. All right, I've already removed the control arm. The control arm is this whole assembly here. And I am filming with two cameras here, so I have to move things around. And the stabilizer bar connects to this. And the stabilizer bar just acts kind of like as a shock absorber. Absorbs some of the shock when this control arm is going up and down from hitting potholes and other things that the wheel will hit. Well, here is the ball joint. So get a good, since this video is about the ball joint, let's get a close-up of it. I just took this control arm out not too long ago. Okay, get my other camera so they can see that. And I took out the control arm and the, get my pliers here. The ball joint, first of all, I want to clarify one thing. A lot of manuals call this the lower ball joint. Well, I consider that a mistake because it no longer is the lower control or ball joint. It is just the ball joint. In older vehicles, there was a lower control arm, and then up above about here, there was an upper control arm. There was a ball joint on the top, and then there was a ball joint on the bottom. That's in the 1991 Mazda 626, there is no upper control arm and there is no upper ball joint. There's just a ball joint, period. So to call it a lower ball joint, and they also call this the lower control arm, that's also a mistake in my opinion, to call it, because there's no upper control arm. In order for something to be lower, there has to be something that's upper. And so since there is no upper ball joint and there is no upper control arm, this should just be called the ball joint and the control arm. Okay, enough on that. The ball joint itself. I took this apart, and this ball joint fits into a hole on the steering knuckle, which I have over here. And it fits into this hole right here. And this bolt is called a pinch bolt. And the reason it's called a pinch bolt is because when you tighten it, this gap here closes maybe 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch and squeezes the neck here of this ball joint. Now notice that this ball joint has a cutout here. Kind of a half moon cutout all the way around. Okay, that's where this pinch bolt comes in. I'm going to take this pinch bolt out. And the pinch bolt, when it's installed, it's right again. The bolt itself is inside of that half moon cutout. Now that is what keeps the ball joint from pulling out when you hit potholes and other bumps that you might encounter. If you have a bolt, a pinch bolt that you've taken out, and this was the case on my passenger side, if there's a dip in the middle, like right here, that makes kind of a half moon dip, you want to discard that bolt, because all of the pounding from bumps and things like that, boom, 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 like this, pounding, that wears away part of that bolt. And if it gets worn away enough, this bolt will no longer hold the ball joint neck into this hole, and it could slip out. And if it slips out while you're driving at 60 miles an hour, it's going to be a really, really bad day for you, because you're going to lose control of your car. You're going to spin all over the place, possibly go in a ditch, you roll your vehicle. So if this bolt has a dip in it in the middle, discard it. This one's in good shape. But the bolt on my passenger side, it does have that dip. So I'm going to be discarding that and getting a new bolt for it. Okay, and don't just use hardware bolts. You know, if it's from the hardware store, make sure it is a high quality hardened steel bolt made for the purpose of being used in the suspension. And one way you can tell that is if there's a tapered end on the end like this, then, it's other camera, if there's a tapered end like this, it's probably an automotive bolt made for the purpose of the suspension. Now, the reason for the tapered end, a lot of times when you do work, you tap with a hammer. I don't have a hammer here, but I'll use pliers. You tap on the end to get it out. Well, if you have an area there that's a tapered area and some distance, you can tap on the end without damaging the threads. That's the reason for that tapered end. It also makes it easier to put the bolt back in when it has a tapered end. Okay, and here's the hole that the ball joint fits into. Now this whole thing here is called a steering knuckle. I'm going to have another video on it and then just explain detail on it. But right now it's just the ball joint. Okay, now notice also on this ball joint that there's rubber here. Now see this rubber where it's separated from here? Get my pointer. You know, this rubber here, position it so my other camera gets it. This rubber along this edge here was connected to here. But over years of bouncing up and down and twisting around like this and pivoting around, that rubber broke. Okay, if that's the case with your ball joint, then you need to get a new ball joint. Myself, I'm going to save this ball joint and keep it in here, and I'm going to cut away this rubber. And the reason I'm going to do that is because for illustrative purposes. This 1991 Mazda 626 that I'm working on, it's going to be a show car. And it's going to be plated historical, and I can only use it for car shows and recreational driving. And so I'm going to leave it on here and so that it is exposed for illustrative purposes. But if you're doing a lot of driving, you want to replace that. Now actually this ball joint itself is not in too bad a shape. It looks like it's in bad shape because this rubber's all screwed up. But the ball that is inside the socket down there, and I haven't cleaned the grease out of there yet. Normally when this rubber is connected, this is filled with grease. And that grease helps to lubricate that ball in that socket. There, so you can see it down there. Well, this ball joint is in pretty good shape. Now the reason I can tell that is there's a little bit of effort I have to put into it to move it around. If it moves around real freely, and if you pull up on the neck here, and that ball is loose in that socket where there's a little bit of play, that's not a good thing either. Because if you hit a good pothole, that ball might pop out of that socket, and it would be the same effect as the ball joint coming out of the hole here. And you're gonna lose control of your car, and that would not be a good day either. So if the ball joint is loose, but if it's kind of tight and you have to put a little effort into moving it around like this, that's a good thing. But if it's real loose and there's a lot of play when you pull up and down on it, that's not a good thing. That ball could pop out of that joint. Okay, so, and as you can see here, there's all the grease. Now, some ball joints are removable from the control arm. I think this one's press fitted in here. It's not welded in. And so one might be able to actually change out this ball joint with if you have a press. But in some vehicles, you have to replace the whole control arm. If you want a new ball joint, you have to get a whole new control arm. So, but again, for illustrative purposes, I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm actually going to even take away more of this rubber, because when the rubber gets like this, it's doing no good. As a matter of fact, it does harm. All the rubber does now is serves as a collector for dirt and a collector for water. So, being as this is going to be a show car, I'm going to be taking the car apart very often, cleaning things, and I'm never going to let rust develop anywhere. And things are always going to be kept well lubricated, because I'm going to be spending so much time with the car, taking it apart and putting it back together many times a year. So, all right, so let's see here. Now, the reason that it pivots around like this is this ball joint needs to pivot in different ways. When this control arm rocks up and down, this ball joint needs to be able to move back and forth to stay in alignment with the steering knuckle. And so that's the reason for it moving around. Let's see here if there's anything else I could add. Okay, so one of my next videos is going to be more detail on this steering knuckle and the hub. This is the hub here, and how to pull out the bearing. One thing I want to do is, forget that. I'm not going to get into that right now. This is about the ball joint. So that's about it for right now, folks. And this is Norm the teacher signing off again. Hopefully you learned a little bit something about your ball joint, and make sure those ball joints are in good shape. Sometimes they fall off while people are driving. I was on my motorcycle once, and a young teenager, just went through a red light, or no, a green light, turned right, and just as he turned right and was getting ready to go onto a highway, which he would have been traveling about 65 miles an hour, just as he made the turn, his front wheel fell off on the passenger side, and it buckled under the car. And I saw that, and I says, "Oh, that's the ball joint that just broke." And so I stopped and helped the kid out while he was calling his dad, and it was all exposed. I could see where the ball joint had broken loose. And so make sure your ball joints are in good shape, and make sure that pinch bolt doesn't have a dip in the middle, because if it does, the pounding has worn that dip in there, and if the dip gets deep enough, that ball joint can pull right out of this hole here on the steering knuckle. Okay? So, again, Norm the teacher signing off here. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.